We have a grocery prices problem in Canada. Maybe you already knew that.
My bill just keeps going up. It doesn't matter how much I try to cut back. It's constantly going up. And I just don't even know what to do about it.
They're ripping us off like they're ripping you off.
I feel like they're all in cahoots.
3 big players dominate most of the market. We pay ever-increasing amounts for our everyday essentials, and grocery store profits are at record levels.
Grocery chain profits are not the reason for food inflation. And as I mentioned...
Profit is too much profit.
Well, so a company needs some degree of profit.
Record profits more than you've ever made,
Mr. Singh, I'm going to stop you there.
So the Competition Bureau of Canada has just issued a direct challenge to government. It was actually just this 50-page report, but let's call it a challenge. The Bureau says, we have a problem, we think a lack of competition is behind it, and there are some key ways government can start to fix it. So here's what we're gonna do. I went through this thing so you don't have to. I'm gonna explain why they think the big grocery chains have gotten too big for anyone's good, and what they propose as possible solutions. First, let's pour one out for all of this country's fallen grocers, assimilated, like the Borg. In 1986, there used to be 8 major grocery chains, all owned by different companies. But Steinberg's was sold to A&P, Metro, Provigo, and IGA. Then Provigo was eaten up by Loblaws. IGA went to Loblaws and Sobeys. A&P was gobbled up by Metro, and Safeway was absorbed into Sobeys. During that time, we did see the arrival of Walmart and Costco, but they do a lot more than just groceries, and there are many fewer of them than there are of the big 3. Only about 500 stores between them, compared to each of the other big chains, which have more than 1,000 stores each.
Those 5 control over 80% of the Canadian grocery business. And so that's a significant stake. What we need to do is step back and say, why has that consolidation happened?
But 5 still isn't bad, right? Well, the amount of concentration in this country's grocery industry is still pretty mind-blowing. Because Loblaws, Sobeys, and Metro, maybe you shop at one of the big 3, but Loblaws owns No Frills, Real Canadian Superstore, Shoppers, Provigo, Maxi, the list goes on. Sobeys owns Safeway, IGA, Freshco, Foodland, Longo's, Farm Boy, and Metro owns Super C, Food Basics, Adonis, Marché Richelieu. Long story short, even if you don't shop specifically at Loblaws, Sobeys, or Metro, you kind of probably do. As you saw, even the discount grocers, the ones you go to if you think Loblaws is too expensive, those are still owned by the big chains. Here's how food prices have changed over the last couple of years. The year-over-year change gradually increasing from about 4% to around 10%. We've all felt this at the grocery store, right? But then look at the rate of general inflation. So the year-over-year change in the price of everything, not just food, that's quite a lot lower, telling us food prices have gone up disproportionately high. Now, yes, there could be lots of reasons for this. The war in Ukraine, pandemic, supply chain shenanigans.
Extreme weather events have been a significant contributor to food price inflation, not just in North America. If you look at rain in the Salinas Valley, we saw tomatoes and lettuce get really expensive in January and February because that's where we get it.
But it's also true that in a system where there's less competition, prices generally go up. And consider, last year, the 3 largest grocers, Loblaws, Sobeys, and Metro, combined had more than $100 billion in food sales. $3.6 billion of that profit. Loblaws alone has increased its profits by around $2 billion in the last couple of years. And according to the Competition Bureau, we saw Canada's largest grocers' food gross margins generally increase by a modest yet meaningful amount over the last 5 years. Generally, they say between 1% and 2%, which, maybe doesn't sound like much, but grocers make all of their money on volume. Even if they only make an extra $1 or $2 on each grocery purchase, if you make that, billions of times, then you're probably looking pretty good. And the Competition Bureau says this is a long-term trend that predates the pandemic, predates the war in Ukraine. And the fact that Canada's largest grocers have generally been able to increase these margins, however modestly, is a sign there is room for more competition in Canada's grocery industry. So here's the problem. The Competition Bureau says it's too hard for small players to break into a market already dominated by so few. For starters, yeah, it's just daunting to go up against these grocery behemoths.
Being an independent retailer in the food business in Canada is extremely difficult, right? You don't have the same distribution infrastructure. You're not buying as effectively as many others. In fact, some of these small independent retailers actually buy from the large grocery chains and their distribution centers as a way of supplying. So it is difficult to be price competitive.
But also think about the challenges in a country like Canada. You know, it's a huge land area to cover, so you need a massive footprint to be effective. Remember how Target tried to break in, opening like 130 stores across the country. That crashed and burned. Another point made in the report. Canada is very multicultural, and one of the barriers to entry is having a multicultural food offering to be competitive. You know, you also have labeling laws in Canada requiring English and French, and considering how many Canadians prefer the supermarket experience as opposed to shopping in lots of little shops, you know, and how most of us probably wouldn't walk or drive more than 15 minutes to do our shopping. This isn't an easy business to get into. You can boil the Competition Bureau's recommendations down to two main ideas. And I'll warn you now, they're ideas, not really action plans. One, government should encourage new, independent, and international entrants to set up shop in Canada. To which you might reply, like, wow, it took how long and how many pages to arrive at that genius idea? But they say, hold on, you know, the government has tools, right? They could remove regulatory red tape. They could provide financial incentives and support, and maybe even encourage more online entrance into the marketplace. But here's the other big suggestion from the Competition Bureau. It's called harmonized unit pricing. So we know what unit prices are, right? Most grocery stores already do this, where you see a jug of orange juice costs $7, and then you see the unit price, whatever it costs per 100 mils, so you can more easily compare, say, a big jug to a small jug, and then see what's the better deal. Well, what if there was a uniform way to do this for all things, across many similar products, across many different stores? So, by law, a customer should easily be able to compare, you know, a jug of orange juice to a bunch of these, you know, juice boxes to a can of frozen juice. But then imagine if that data was harmonized across all grocers in all provinces. You know, you could even just compare prices online. Just type orange juice into the search engine and bam, you see what every major chain is selling juice for, rather than having to do the heavy lifting of comparison shopping yourself. There are already ways to do something like this, but being able to compare on such a granular level across a wide swath of stores with detailed unit pricing, that's where the Competition Bureau says there's room for improvement. And maybe that would help bring prices down by having grocers really have to fight for your dollar. But as I said, this is a plan thin on any actual plan. Like most things, it's a start. But the sooner Canadians realize there's a problem, and one that maybe can be fixed, maybe the better off we'll all be.